Moses is one of the most powerful figures in the entire Bible, chosen by God to lead his people, to speak face to face with the Lord, and to deliver the Ten Commandments. But in one of the most revealing moments of his early encounter with God, Moses hides his face. In Exodus 3-6, when God appears to Moses in the burning bush and declares, "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob," Scripture says, "Then Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God." This act may seem simple, but it holds deep spiritual meaning rooted in the ancient understanding of holiness, fear, and reverence. To begin understanding why Moses hid his face, we need to look at the context of God's holiness. In the Old Testament, God's presence was not casual or common, it was overwhelming, majestic, and terrifying. In Exodus 19, when God descended on Mount Sinai with thunder, fire, and smoke, even the mountain trembled. The people were told not to touch the mountain or they would die. This wasn't because God was unkind, but because his holiness is so pure and powerful that sinful humans cannot withstand it. Moses, being human, instinctively responded to that presence with fear and humility. He wasn't hiding out of guilt, he was hiding out of awe. Furthermore, Moses' action echoes a pattern throughout the Bible. In Genesis 32-30, Jacob said, "I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared." The idea was clear. No one could see the full glory of God and live. Even in Isaiah 6-5, the prophet Isaiah, upon seeing a vision of the Lord, cries out, "Woe is me, I am ruined, for I am a man of unclean lips." Isaiah didn't hide his face physically, but he reacted with the same kind of fear and reverence. In a consistent truth in Scripture, to stand before God is to be completely undone by his glory. Now back to Moses, at the burning bush. The bush was on fire but not consumed. That in itself was miraculous. But when God spoke from the bush, the scene turned holy. God told Moses to remove his sandals, for he was standing on holy ground. Removing sandals was a sign of respect, but hiding one's face was deeper. It was an act of submission and reverence, acknowledging that God is far above man. In that moment, Moses knew he was in the presence of the eternal, living God. And his immediate, natural response was to look away, not out of shame, but out of deep holy fear. Later in his life, Moses' relationship with God became even more intimate. In Exodus 33-11, we read that the Lord would speak to Moses face to face, as one speaks to a friend. This doesn't contradict Exodus 3, it shows development. Moses grows in his relationship with God. But even then, Moses longs to see God's full glory. And when he asks in Exodus 33-18, God responds in verses 22-23 by saying, "You cannot see my face, for no one may see me and live. I will cover you with my hand until I have passed by." Even with all his closeness to God, Moses still couldn't look directly upon the full presence of the Lord. It reinforces the truth. God's holiness is so overwhelming that even the most faithful must be shielded from its fullness. Another reason Moses hid his face has to do with the spiritual posture of humility. All throughout Scripture, humility is the pathway to receiving God's grace. In James 4-6, we read, "God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble." Moses' decision to hide his face showed he understood his smallness compared to God's greatness. He wasn't trying to elevate himself, he was shrinking himself in God's light. This humility is what made him a vessel fit to lead. God wasn't looking for the proud or the self-righteous, he was calling someone who feared him rightly. In Jewish tradition, this moment also represents the proper fear of the Lord, which is the beginning of wisdom, according to Proverbs 9:10. It is not fear in the modern sense of panic or dread, but fear in the ancient biblical sense, reverence, and deep respect. Moses was beginning his journey as God's chosen deliverer. Hiding his face wasn't weakness, it was a sign that he was ready to be shaped, humbled, and empowered by God. There is another layer to this story that emerges later in Exodus 34. After spending time with God on Mount Sinai, Moses' face becomes radiant, literally glowing with the glory of God. It was so intense that he had to wear a veil when speaking to the people. Here, the symbolism reverses. Instead of Moses hiding his face from God, now others must be shielded from the residual glory of God shining from Moses. This is profound. It shows that time spent in reverent awe of God doesn't leave you unchanged. It marks you, it transforms you, and it radiates through your life. So why did Moses hide his face? Because he understood the gravity of divine encounter. He knew he was standing before the eternal creator of the universe, not just a voice, not just a feeling, but the I am. His instinctive reaction was to humble himself, to shield his human eyes from the unfiltered glory of God. That act of hiding his face became the foundation of his relationship with God, a relationship built not on arrogance or entitlement, but on fear, reverence, and worship. In today's world, we often think of God as distant or casual, but Moses reminds us that true closeness to God begins with holy reverence. We don't need to fear God like we fear danger. We need to fear him like we stand in awe before a mighty king. The kind of fear that leads to worship, obedience, and transformation. Moses' act of hiding his face wasn't cowardice, it was courage shaped by reverence. And it set the tone for a life that would change the course of history.